Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Cohen, the author of An Introduction to the Art and Science of Chinese Tea Ceremony. Today, we're discussing Book 2, Chapter 10, Section 3, Downdraft Kilns. Here to talk about this chapter is our editorial team, Zongjun Li. Hello, hello. And Emily Huang.
Hi, everyone.
Wonderful. My first question, what is a downdraft kiln?
A downdraft kiln is a kiln that maybe you can get it from its name, where the chimneys are located instead on the top of the kilns. It is towards the bottom, and so that the air is circulated in a way that it comes in from below up into the inside of the kiln and then down again.
Yeah, you can basically envision it as a compressed version of a dragon kiln. It still retains a lot of similar structure as a dragon kiln, and it uses the chimney to create a suction of air to create airflow inside the kiln to fire the wares inside.
Well, I guess the important thing about the downdraft kiln is, as Emily said, the chimney is at the bottom. So you actually have a firing box at the bottom, and the heat has to flow up and it has to fill the entire chamber in order to exit the chimney at the bottom. So you could envision the kiln as a U, where the heat flows from the front of the U up into the kiln and then down through the chimney. So
That's right.
The key insight into what a downdraft kiln is. What is the advantage of the chimney at the bottom? Is there an advantage? What is the purpose of that technology versus a top chimney?
There are a few advantages for this type of downdraft, and one being, as Jason mentioned, it creates a more condensed airflow. It provides a little bit more of a efficiency compared to previous kiln types, such as dragon kilns.
It's slightly less fuel efficient than other types of kilns because it radiates away much of the heat, but it uses far less fuel per firing, and the stability of the heat is very high, although there is a top to bottom gradient in the overall heat.
Yeah, that is correct. And also for such construction, you can really condense the space required to build a kiln to fire a larger amount of wares. And the structure is fairly simple to build. And it really allows the chamber to create a more homogeneous and stable temperature across all of the sections, although you still would have a gradient of temperature from top to bottom. The Chinese name for downdraft kiln literally means upside down flame kiln. You have the flame coming from top to bottom instead of coming from each side, like tunnel kiln or a gas kiln or electric kiln. Very interesting kiln type if you look into it. Although it's not as fuel efficient, it's much smaller kiln, so it doesn't necessarily require significant amount of fuel source.
Where did the design of the downdraft kilns originate in China? Were downdraft kilns developed in Yixing ex novo, or was there inspiration from other ceramic centers aiding the design of the Yixing's downdraft kilns?
So the design of downdraft kilns did not originate from Yixing. It were based on another type called mantou yao, which can be translated to steampunk type kilns, and probably more in the northern China areas, and probably even back earlier to the Warrior States period, which is about 475 BC to 221 BC.
Yeah, the prototype mantou yao really looks kind of like some of the wood-fired pizza burner that you see in the West. But it was originated from that shape and then refined during the Northern Song Dynasty.
Which brings me to the most important question of this podcast. Charcoal pizza or wood-fired pizza?
Wood-fired. No, heavy oil burn pizza.
It's not a heavy oil kiln. Burn that olive oil.
Excessive taste of grease. The petroleum flavor, it's much better than truffle, yeah?
No need for truffle oil if you use a heavy oil kiln for your pizza. When were downdraft kilns first used in Yixing, and why were they only used for about 2 decades during the F1 period?
So the downdraft kilns entered Yixing about mid to late 1950s, and it was adopted because it basically can burn anything. And it was during a time when craftsmen were facing a lot of fuel shortages. So they were not just burning wood, they were burning coal or oil and anything they can think of. And it works for downdraft kilns. But slowly they realized this is not quite efficient fuel-wise, and it was not very clean, and they were developing and realizing other better technologies, better ways to burn. So it slowly faded.
What was the quality of the Zisha wares fired in a downdraft kiln?
As we mentioned earlier, because there were a range of different types of fuel sources, it really created a lot of dust and it was just not clean. There were things in the dust or ashes that could remain on the wares. To be honest, the Zisha wares that were produced in downdraft kilns, especially in the earlier periods of downdraft kilns adoptions, were not very good.
Yeah, so even though there's a relatively stable temperature overall, there's quite a difference between the top stack versus the bottom stack. So when people were trying to figure out exactly how to use the kiln, along the way, many flaws and crackage exist. And also the mixed use of different fuel source really create a lot of smoke. Not very high quality wares.
A lot of surface blemishes.
Yeah.
And yet people still are all over collecting F1. Do these surface blemishes have an effect on the tea, or are these just aesthetic?
It's like people still collect very early Kuroizawa whiskey, like it's a part of the legend, but not necessarily high quality. Yeah.
In this chapter, I write that historically, downdraft kilns were a transitory technology in the progression of kiln use in Yixing. So if the wares were lower quality and if they were eventually abandoned, why has there recently been a re-emergence of downdraft kilns as the leading, really only kiln design for wood-fired wares of Zisha material?
Very interestingly, we actually physically visit one of the downdraft kiln, wood-fired downdraft kiln in our last Yixing trip. And what we learned is that, first of all, it's not necessarily legal to burn wood in Yixing, except from the once a year ceremonially fired dragon kiln in Yixing. You don't technically allowed to burn wood in other places. So downdraft kiln is really a good middle ground because it's pretty small, so it doesn't really attract a lot of attention. We drove about half an hour into the mountain to our friend's studio to visit his site. It's quite interesting. Wood fire kiln, wood fire wares has this like irreplaceable charm to me. The warmth, the weight, the gravity in your hand, the interesting surface texture that it creates. It has a lot of merits. Nowadays, people who owns and fire downdraft kilns in Yixing use high quality fuel source, and they have the mechanism and the technology of using such kiln perfected over the years. So it's no longer such a stumbled process to fire wares in downdraft kiln anymore. And for the wares that we have seen and end up purchasing some, they're quite beautiful and quite nice to use.
So in summary, we've returned to downdraft kilns because they're small, they're compact, they can be placed up in the mountains. The officials who like tea and like Yixing, why they oversee it, also appreciate wood-fired wares. You get small amounts of firing with high-quality fuel sources. So really the issue with the downdraft kilns wasn't the kiln technology itself. This is a continuation of the issues during the communist period of deforestation, the lack of high-quality fuel sources.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, garbage in, garbage out. Can't expect high-quality wares coming from low-quality fuel source.
Earlier in this discussion, we had mentioned the issues of ash and dust and wear breakage. Do we find that wear breakage is still high in a downdraft kiln? Has there been a continuous progression of this technology so that there's now less ash and dust and there's less breakage? Or are Yixing artists today resigned to wood-fired wares sell at a little bit of a higher price because there's going to be more breakage and flaws?
Interesting question. So what we have learned is that for a lot of the artists, they don't necessarily use downdraft kiln throughout. Sometimes the wares will be fired in a electric kiln once, and then it gets the second fire. First, it went through a kiln, the mouth adjustment process, and then they get refired in a wood kiln, a downdraft kiln, to receive the surface finish or the texture finish. So that's, I guess, one way to prevent intensive crackage issue. And also higher quality fuel source and better control of the temperature also really helps. And nowadays, they also adopted very interesting material to insulate the kiln. It's asbestos? Yeah, asbestos. How safe they are, I don't know, but they do a good job in insulating the heat radiating from the kiln.
That was a little concerning, seeing the kiln entirely lined with this. Well, none of us have developed mesothelioma yet. I guess we're okay.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting visiting that site. I missed that place.
So Yixing had a history of firing other wares, including Yizhang, of course. But these kilns that were originally from northern China weren't originally used for zisha. They were originally used for other ceramic art forms. Was there any history of those art forms entering Yixing with the spread of these kilns?
So, along with the shape from mantle kilns that originated from the northern China region, the intended ware that it was originally designed for were some celadon wares, especially glazed ones. And so that also came along and entered into Yixing.
So there was a late blossoming of celadon wares in Yixing for a short period of time. Have we ever seen any Yixing celadon wares? Are there any pieces in museums or anything? And is there any contemporary production of this?
We have seen a few pieces in the Yixing Ceramic Museum in the Yixing town. But as the demand of zisha really thrives, a lot of these studios stopped producing all kinds of other wares except zisha, which is kind of sad to see, like Yijun, celadons, and there used to be a very large production of other daily usage ware too. I think we heard of one of the artists talking about like Yixing being a major ceramic tiles production region back in the days, but now it's mostly.
Here we can mention the Yixing ceramic tiles in the Starbucks.
Yeah, that was very cool. I don't know if Emily.
No,
Okay,
do
so
tell.
yeah, very interesting. It's Blue Bottle opened a bunch of new chains in China. Personally, I think the quality of Blue Bottle in China is significantly better than the ones in the States. I think Jason will agree with me.
Different supply chain.
Yeah, different supply chain. And one of their flagship cafe in Shanghai, they use, I think, some 5,000 pieces of ceramic tiles, all fired using zisha. And
Wow.
yeah, and they install them on the floor, on the wall, on the ceiling. Oh, it's quite beautiful.
Very cool.
Wow.
Very cool to see
Googling that.
Yeah. Well, if our listeners had the chance to visit Shanghai, please do visit that Blue Bottle in the Kerry Center.
That's great.
This is not a paid advertisement.
But we welcome paid advertisement.
We do. Blue Bottle, Nestle.
All right, everyone. That's all the time that we have for today. Thank you for joining us in this edition of Tea Technique Editorial Conversations. Please join us again for our next conversation, Tunnel Kilns.